Hey y'all. So, today I'm going to talk about something near and dear to my heart, and that's fatphobia. My favorite. Everybody's favorite. More specifically, the racist roots of fatphobia. I got some great ideas and was truly inspired by this book right here, Fearing the Black Body by Dr. Sabrina Springs. Truly fascinating read. Hard but good. Transformative. Um, we're gonna have a lot of tough topics to go over today, including fatphobia, discrimination, racism, sexism, eating disorders, all that kind of stuff. I'm also going to be using a lot of language that understands that fat is not bad, that fat is not unhealthy, that capitalism is an enemy of the people, and that racism is an active force in America today. Um, I'm going to go over a few things that Dr. Sabrina Springs says in her book, see how it kind of connect it with how it affects us, perhaps as white or straight-sized people, and then gonna kind of get into it myself. Forgive me if I'm a little rough around the edges, but I really think that this is an important message that we need to get out. So first things first, I'm fat. I'm fat. Perhaps not the fattest, but I have been described and probably identify most with being a fat woman. I have experienced fat discrimination and fat phobia almost my entire life, and I would say that the majority of it has come from my own family. And through doing this project, I had to face a lot of awful and terrifying truths about my own self-hatred and my own internalized fat phobia. Um, it was hard trying to find information about fat activism and the racist roots of fat phobia is hard, but that's there, and society has tried to hide it from us. I'm sure some of you who are familiar with fat activism have heard about the Fat Underground, or perhaps books like this, Fat Activism, or other books like this. They exist. It's a whole form of study. But I didn't know that growing up, and I bet you didn't know that either. So that's why it's important to me. Dr. Sabrina Springs kind of explains how after slavery was abolished in America, the way to distinguish free from slave, which had been color up to that point, it wasn't good enough anymore. The lines had been a little too blurred for America, for white America at the time. So they needed another way to kind of categorize, there we go, categorize superior and inferior. And one of the most prevalent ways to do that was to look for certain traits that were considered savage, which included overeating, drinking, and sex. And these are ideas that still exist to this day. Um, these ideas were further solidified by the church, because after all, slothfulness and gluttony are a sin. To quote Dr. Springs, my research showed that anti-fat attitudes originated not with medical findings, but with Enlightenment-era belief that overfeeding and fatness were evidence of savagery and racial inferiority. And it's with this new form of inferiority that you can connect an unruly type of fatness with blackness. The superior, the white populace would continue to use this to discriminate not only against black bodies, but against all fat bodies. This way of thinking would have a bizarre but not unexpected result on the American populace well into the turn of the century. In a New York Times article published in 1894, it says, thousands of women and men in New York City are starving, although they have plenty of money to buy food. Eating disorders. Isn't that funny? I really think that we don't like to talk about it. It's everyone's dirty little secret. But eating disorders has been an American problem since the beginning. And then she continues to say that with these reminders of fatness being bad, of being black. It is a double-edged sword used against black bodies, but it also serves as a reminder, particularly to white women, of what they cannot be. Um, it would be a few years before the medical field would hop on board, because believe it or not, the medical field during that time period of the turn of the century preferred voluptuous women. In fact, it was highly documented that American doctors were concerned that American women were too skinny. And they didn't know why this new trend of skinny or thin or starving was starting to happen. But it eventually did, and that was with the use of healthism. Healthism is defined as a lifestyle that prioritizes health and fitness over anything else. It seems innocuous enough, but it is with this word that modern society, particularly the medical, uses to discriminate against blackness and fatness. Now, compound that with the bias that fat is unhealthy. Suddenly, fat has been contextualized as evil, slothful, and bad for health. Now, historically, as we all know, the treatment of black bodies, particularly women's bodies, um, it's not good. And I'm not going to get into the sordid details of how the medical field has butchered and experimented on black bodies. But I am going to mention that even today, with the forced sterilizations of women of color in prisons and the dubious connection of obesity and the coronavirus, these are ideas that are not necessarily founded in science, but in the unconscious social mind. And it affects us, and it uses one word to do it, and it is obesity. The worst word for a fat person ever. You might be wondering why I think that most polite society considers obesity to be a very politically correct term for being fat. And let me tell you, it is not. This word, the O word as I will refer to it, is the word that allows doctors to avoid appropriate care. It is the word our peers use to objectify us. The O word, obesity epidemic, is a fear-mongering blanket statement used to gloss over the real problem. We live in a society with poverty levels out of this world. Access to affordable healthcare is almost non-existent for poor people in our country. Food deserts are becoming more common, and it is proven fact that these deserts affect low-income communities, most of which in America are majority black and brown communities. And that is not by chance. Um, conservative or liberal, fat discrimination is widely accepted. Absolutely. As recently as Anderson Cooper's most recent remark of Donald Trump being an obese turtle. There's no exception. Of all the heinous crimes our last president committed, his worst attribute was his weight. Why is that? I saw friends on both sides. Liberal, conservative, far left. It was funny. It was funny. And I'm going to tell you why it is accepted. It is that unhinged fatphobia, which is what I consider this, is condoned because it is an acceptable form of segregation. Let that sink in. Fatphobia is a condoned form of segregation. History shows that America's treatment of people of color is blood-stained and battle-hardened. It is not in America's best interest to allow for equality. America needs a way to create the other. The othering of black bodies has always existed in our country. It built this country. Our economy requires ways to discriminate and segregate in order to prosper. If the coronavirus right now isn't proof enough that who is making the money, it certainly is not us. It is certainly not black and brown bodies. It is certainly not impoverished bodies. It is in the best interest of our country and our economy to other the black bodies, to other fat bodies. And part of that is American exceptionalism. creating an idyllic world filled with beautiful white thin people is profitable. The weight loss industry is just that. It's an industry. Weight Watchers, I'm going to have some facts out here for you. I'm going to read it off. Weight Watchers alone made $223.7 million in 2018. Jenny Craig's net worth is $300 million. Make no mistake, the weight loss industry makes money off of its clientele. The total US weight loss market grew an estimated of 4.1% in 2018, from $69.8 billion to $72.7 billion. The total market is forecasted to grow 2.6% through 2023, including through the coronavirus. Now, think back to what we said earlier about how the double-edged sword created by discriminatory practices against Black and fat bodies. We continue to segregate and subjugate Black bodies while reminding majority white women and white people in general of what they cannot be. And that is fat, and that is Black. So this all kind of sucks. This is the part in my little essay writing that I kind of petered off because I was freaking depressed. And then I got frustrated, and then I didn't want to do anymore. I won't lie, this has been a long road to get to this point. But you know what it made me do? I started having conversations with my coworkers. I started having conversations with my family. And that is what I think there is to do about it. Obviously, even if you don't agree with me, I really think that these are conversations that you should ask. Maybe you should ask your fat family members, your fat coworkers, your fat friends, how they feel about being fat. It's not a question that's often asked because I would say that the majority of fat women and men I know, they like being fat. They do. There's such a confidence boost in people who have accepted how they look. And it's beyond self-confidence per se. It's a rebellion. Walking out of the house 300 pounds is a rebellion against forces that say that I shouldn't be alive. And that brings me to something that's pretty scary for me. I contemplated not doing this because being fat positive, particularly on the internet, it will garner me some death threats. Or the more insidious kind of death threat, which is, if you don't lose weight, you're gonna die. And my first response to that is, we all gonna die, honey. We're all gonna die. And I feel that particularly with this subject, we need to realize that our own internalized fat phobia, our own microaggressions, our own feelings about like, who we are is all based off of ideas and lies that have been taught us from the church, from our family. One of the hardest things that I had to come to terms with is that my extended family are white exceptionalists, that I grew up in a culture of dieting. Dieting wasn't diet, it was eating disorders. It was all around me. It was, I would be beautiful, I would get a man if I was thin. And they used religion. They used the idea that I'll never find love. This is brainwashing. And my story is not unique, but it is very white. And that's the thing, is this idea of thinness doesn't come from an idea of being healthy. My health is none of your business. Your health is none of my business. But the judgment that comes from being fat comes from a dark, racist point of view that you may not even realize. And so that's what I want to get across with this video. I've started to ramble, and I apologize for that. But I really think that if you anything you come out of this with, just think about it, just a little bit. Um, Thank you for listening and watching.